I'm glad you're bringing that up. If this is the third time that I've heard that. So I guess it must be a real challenge. Again, I think I would need to talk with staff, parents, my bosses, colleagues, to find out what's been the problem in the past, what might be some possible remedies, and what time these folks really have preferences that I be there. Ideally, I think to be an effective leader, the times in particular buildings would need to vary to some degree, or one day a week or 2 days a week they would vary. Other times they would be set, so that people would know when you're coming. But then there can be some variance so that you get the picture of the whole day. Are you Joan? Can you enlighten me a little bit what the particular problem?
Okay. Well, my children are no longer in the Hurd School, but the Hurd School my children attended for the last 15 years. And we have had 7 different principals for various reasons in 15 years. And the issue always was, we shared a principal with the Atwell, which is a big complex, so that was understandable. The 2 principals that shared us with the Atwell had 400 children here and only 100 children maybe at the Hurd, so the greater part of their time was spent at this building. So we felt at the Hurd more like orphans, that we didn't have anybody to call our own for any great length of time. Now that the new districts are up, the Walton is a similar school in size, except that the Walton is a newer school and the Hurd is an older building. And I think that with the older building, we have a very teeny office for the principal. It's really not a proper sized office. And at the Walton School, it was a bigger office. So I think, again, the principals tended to spend their time more in the bigger building, and the issue was, how long will they come and spend at the Hurd?
I can tell you that I started in a building that was 140 years old, Tremont Street in the Bronx. And I love that building. I love the oak in it, the marble. I didn't even mind setting the traps that we had to set for the critters in the evening. So the newness or the oldness of the building is truly irrelevant to me. I built a new $2.2 million school last year, and it wasn't as homey as the old one. The office, I'm not in an office a lot. I really am an out and abouter. In fact, I have to make sure. I have been criticized for not being in the office. So office space, I don't need much. A closet, I've had an office that's half the size of this room and one that's closet size. So that's not a big, that part of it wouldn't be a big deal to me. I think that, if I'm hearing you correctly, Hurd's felt like an orphan. And so if for that reason, then no other. Perhaps Hurd would need, whomever you are, would need some time. And you should say that loud so that you're heard about Hurd. I guess I can't second guess it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
We have the orphan.
Yeah, I was going to say, what about the, I knew you were going to say that. What about the West Ward? They're the orphans.
The junior high usually tells me they are.
Well,
Any other questions from the floor? All right.
Maybe in the 20th century, beam me up, Scotty will be a way to do that.
Yeah. Could you tell us what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are?
Sure. My strengths are that I think that I don't give up easily, and that means that I'm not easily befoozled. I'm not. It's hard to shock me, or it's hard to rattle me, and that I'm really honest. More so than I'm honest. I try to be kind. Sometimes I even try to be subtle, but I am honest, and I believe in honesty, and I believe that it's the shortest route to great things for kids. I really do. I think wasting any other time beating around the bush is not ideal, and that's hard. We have to remind each other of that, but that's hard. Weaknesses, curricularly, I've just mentioned that my numerical skills could use some work, and I would hope maybe somebody would work on me on that. My tendency to fix if you will. To assume that because Jean's brought an issue to me, it means help. It doesn't always mean help, it sometimes just means listen. That's something I try to remind myself of. My friends in the Bronx used to call me the White Tornado, and that was partly derogatory, partly affectionate, because I do move quickly. Anyone that moves quickly inevitably makes mistakes. I try, if I'm doing that, then to slow down. But I have a tendency, I believe life is too short, and there's lots to do, and I like to do lots of things. I have been criticized for being too much hands-on management. The roof leaked in East Hampton, and I got up there with the custodian because I figured my superintendent and my head of maintenance would be saying X, Y, and Z and talking, like over my head about this roof. And I wanted, since it was dropping buckets in the middle of our science labs, I wanted to know so that I would be informed to tell teachers. And I was criticized for, not delegating that, and there was a point to be made with that. I put out a fire once with a fire extinguisher before I called concurrent with calling the fire department, but I was supposed to wait. It's illegal, I guess, in New Hampshire to put out a fire until the fire people get there. Which seemed to be kind of ridiculous because the fire was blazing. The 8th grader had lit a trash can. But I'm sorry. I don't mean to take it frivolously. I have my weaknesses for sure.
You may have mentioned this already. What are your professional goals?
My professional goals are to find schools that are serious about kids, really serious, and wanting to grow. And that doesn't mean change, but to take long, serious, sustained looks at what we're doing and why we're doing it. And after a year and a half, or whenever we decide what the course is, then to go after that course with enthusiasm, venom and eagerness. And I want to do that for a 4 or 5 year period, or longer. When I'm 60, I want to go to law school, not to practice law, but I like going to school. I'll be 60 before my loans will be totally paid off from the last time I went to school. And I think the law is majestic to read about, that kind of thing. I have no desire to practice it, but I would like to go back and get that degree.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do
It's been a long evening.
Do you have any concluding remarks for us?
I want to thank you for the process, from Jean's letter and this group that sat around the table and talked. From the very beginning, it's been marvelous. And whomever you choose, I'm sure will be one lucky person. I salute you. Hopefully you won't have to do this too often because you must be tired after that.
Well, we thank you, Dr. Turner.
On behalf of the Principal Screening Committee, and introduce the members of the Screening Committee that are here with me, or here with us tonight. We have Joan Snell, who's a teacher at the Walton School. We have Mary Diopoulos, also in the front row, a teacher at the West Ward School, kindergarten. Patty O'Keefe, a teacher at the Hurd School and also a parent. Bill Chetwin, chairman of the school committee. In the back, over here, we have Rich Burchill, who's a principal here in town and also a parent at the Walton and West Ward School, or just Walton? Walton and West Ward. Other committee members that I don't see here are a couple of parents. Joan DeBenedictis, who's a parent at Walton School, and Donna Lowe's, a parent at the Hurd School. Another member, the final member of the school, the final member of this committee who is not here, is Marge McGrath, and she is the principal at the Atwell School. And I'm Jean Latham. I'm a parent with a child at the Walton School. And what we're going to do is have Dr. Mayo ask Lisa Patella, who's our candidate here tonight, some questions. And then while he's doing that, we're going to pass out some paper and pencil for those of you in the audience who might also have a question to ask Lisa. And while he's doing that, or at some point, pass those back up to me, and I will ask her those questions. And then at the end, if there are anything else informal that occurs to you that you'd like to ask her, please feel free to do so. Dr. Mayo?
Thank you. Thank you, Jean. Lisa Patella is our first candidate and the first one to go through this process. I've told Lisa this is a very friendly group, and we know that she's going to be really relaxed, and she's going to really tell us about herself and certainly not be intimidated by the fact that this is a public reception for her. So welcome, Lisa. Welcome very much. Thank you very much for going through this process and for making out the application and going through the screening committee. By way of introduction, would you like to, do you have any opening remarks for us?
Certainly, yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Lisa Patella, and I'm a teacher at the Lincoln School in Melrose. I've been there for 6 years, and during that time, I've taught 1st, 2nd, and presently 5th grade. The Melrose school system has been very good to me. They've allowed me a lot of opportunities to be involved in many staff development initiatives, and I've really enjoyed my stay at Melrose. I've been encouraged by administrators and teachers to pursue a career in administration because I found that I have really enjoyed working in these areas. I was elected, I was elected by my peers to serve as the chairperson for an accreditation team, the accreditation steering committee for our school. And so I've been involved in many parent-teacher relations. We've done a lot of things that way. I've also had many math initiatives in the area of mathematics. I've been trained in Math Their Way and have served as a math resource person for my school and for the city of Melrose. I've also been involved in a Book Buddies program, which came out of a consortium that we visited a few years ago as a team from our school, the Northeast Regional Consortium for Drug and Alcohol-Free Schools. And the Book Buddies program is a program that deals with developing self-esteem and pairing older students with younger students. Some other things that I've been involved in more recently are a volunteer program that's come out of the Melrose Public School System Strategic Planning Committee, where we've been trying to involve more people from within the community in the school system. That includes the elderly and business people, as well as parents and students within the school. I've also been involved in literature-based reading, process science. I've worked at the Museum of Science. I've had many experiences during my 6 years in Melrose, and I've enjoyed every one of them. And I look forward to working in Wakefield and bringing some new initiatives to the system.
Thank you, Lisa. You answered most of my questions. No. You very modestly left out some recognition here. Would you like to tell us some of the recognitions that you have received? The Krista McAuliffe Teaching Award, could you tell us about that?
Sure. That's an award that was presented by a group of students and parents from within our school. Some of you may have children who are in Girl Scouts, and they, a few years ago, had nominated people for this Krista McAuliffe Award, and I was one of a few from my school.
And you're also recognized for outstanding administrative contributions to the Lincoln School. Want to tell us about that?
Yes. Mostly that would be related to the accreditation process, where I served again as chairperson. During that in that capacity, I had to hold staff meetings and run the process of accreditation, which is very extensive. I had to work in conjunction with the accreditation team and the accreditation bureau, and had to develop questionnaires for parents and teachers and make sure that the process was completed.
Maybe you could tell us something about the accreditation process. Now, in Wakefield, we have not entered into the accreditation process for elementary schools. Now, you had a very significant role in your school, and maybe you might just amplify that a little bit. How did that process work, and how did it proceed, and what was the outcome?
We are the first school in Melrose to go through the elementary accreditation process. Our high school has gone through it, so we did not have any guidance from any other people, so we found that it was very interesting. We were sort of making it up as we were going along. But it was a 5-year process. We worked in conjunction with the parents and the advisory council of parents, the students, and all of the teachers had to work together and serve on different subcommittees in which we would in which we would study each part of the curriculum and each part of our school and the educational process as it affects the students at our school. We had an in-depth study of each curriculum area, the effectiveness of our teaching and our methods and the variety of methods that we use, right down to the structure of the building itself and recommendations for improvement in all areas.
Good. You also served as an administrative intern. Now, was this part of your studies at Harvard University?
Yes, it is.
Could you tell us about that?
Sure. I attended Harvard University and received my master's in education. During that time, I worked within a principal certification track, in which I took many courses that were related to administrative, to the aspects of administration, such as budget, school law, staff development, and supervision. And during that time, I spent most of my day and most of my free time working with my principal as an administrative intern. So that was a two-year ordeal.
And during this period, according to your resume, you did institute a peer supervision model?
Yes.
Could you tell us just exactly what peer supervision is and how it works?
Peer supervision is a model where teachers observe each other and make recommendations or suggestions to each other. It's a way for adult staff education to take place, staff development to take place. This initiative came out of a class that I was taking at Harvard at that time. It was called the clinical supervision model, where I served as a supervisor to one of my peers, another teacher in the school. And this took place for a matter of a few months, where I would go and observe her regularly. It would involve the process of a pre-conference where she would identify areas in which she would like to improve upon, and then we would have the observation session where I would collect data, and then the post-conference where we would discuss the data, and we would discuss it, and I would present the data to her, and we would make recommendations for further improvement. There were times when she wanted to continue on with a certain topic, or she wanted to change and go to something else, but it's really driven by the person who's being observed.
And how would you compare that model of supervision with other models you know?
I think that it's most beneficial because, again, the development comes from the person and not being placed down upon by some external force. As adults, we know what we'd like to work on, and I think it's important that teachers are treated with respect and given the opportunity in a non-threatening way to make improvements in their teaching and in their styles. I found it very beneficial, and the people that I've worked with that have done it have been extremely happy with it.
And if you were a principal, would that be the model of supervision that you would like to see in your schools?
Yes, I'd like to implement that. I would work within the framework of the Wakefield Public Schools, but I think I believe that that's the most effective way for adult education to happen.
You also indicate that you were a consultant. Could you tell us about that? You were a consultant with Abt Associates in Cambridge?
Yes. Abt Associates is a social research firm in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I was contacted by a person from that company to work as a consultant to the Migrant Educational Workers Program, in which my capacity in this job was to evaluate the whole language program as it was implemented within the Migrant Educational Workers Program. So during this time, it was a summer program where children who had English as a second language and whose parents were migrant workers would attend academically based educational programs at various schools throughout the state. So I would travel to places such as Lowell, Holyoke, Bedford, Lynn, and talk with teachers and observe teachers on their use of whole language techniques. Recording data and come back and present it. I was trained in whole language and as a prerequisite to this job, and have been using it in my own class as well. It was very beneficial to see other teachers at work. Very rarely as a teacher do we get to watch other teachers and see how they do their jobs, especially in the area of whole language where it's up and coming. It was very interesting to see.
When you were when you were in a consultant role and you visited all these ongoing programs, how were you received? Did you, teachers didn't know you,
Right.
so you were in a somewhat of a supervisory role.
Somewhat, yes.
So what was your style? How did you present yourself, and how did you get them to cooperate with you in terms of the programs that you wanted them to use?
Right. Well, I was scheduled to come in well in advance, so they were aware of when I was going to be visiting them, and most of the teachers have been through this before and knew of the procedures. I tried to be as informal and as unobtrusive as possible. I would come in and introduce myself early in the day and try to relax them and get to know them as well, and let them know what I was going to be looking for, and showed them my materials, my checklists and things. And I just sat in the back, and sometimes I was asked to participate, which was great. As a teacher, I really enjoyed that, and I would get involved. And it seemed the less formal I was, the more comfortable the teachers were, and I really didn't have a problem with it. Everyone seemed to do very well.
Yeah, and that leads into a style of leadership. And if you were to characterize the style of leadership that most clearly describes how you would behave as a principal or a leader, how would you describe it? What kind of a principal would I see if I walked into your buildings, or if I consulted with you, or if I listened to teachers talking about you?
Right. I think one of the most important aspects of being a principal is that you are an educational leader, and that you provide resources for the people with whom you work. That includes students as well as teachers. I would be the type of principal that would like to again, make people feel at ease. I think that it's important that teachers are not threatened, and that they realize that they may take risks, and that they would be encouraged by me to take risks. I feel that it's really important that people try to extend themselves and try to grow as professionals, and I would try to provide as many opportunities as possible for that. I think it's important, an important role of the principal would be one as a facilitator, as a mentor, as a communicator, a disciplinarian, an educational leader, as mentioned before, and the school spokesperson, because again, that's another important role.
And parents, how would you include parents within your leadership model?
I would very much like to explore the option of having a school-based management program at the school in which I work, or the schools in which I work, and I think that parents should be a very integral part of that program. I see it happening in my own mind, and again, it would have to be under the structure of the Wakefield Public Schools, but I would see advisory councils or different subcommittees of parents and teachers working together to improve the educational process, people working in the areas of finance and program development, perhaps staff development, fundraising, and different areas. I think that parents are very important resources and should be included in the process.
One of the questions the school committee has asked me regarding parent councils, I think you're talking about parent
Yes.
councils.
Parent-teacher councils.
Parent-teacher councils, how would they work? What would be the balance of decision-making? Who would make the decisions? How would decisions come about? What would be the principal's role in the decision-making process if we had this model?
Right. I think that ultimately, again, it has to be within the framework of what's acceptable from the Wakefield Public Schools. I see it as a democratic society where parents and teachers work together. I think it's really important, though, to stress that teachers are the professionals in many areas in education, and that's not to say that parents don't have their place. They certainly do. But I think that it's important to recognize that teachers are the professionals. And parents certainly have very important input as to what their children need and what the educational process needs for improvement. And so I see it as a balanced relationship between teachers and parents, and making suggestions to the principal and then finally to yourself. And hopefully those will be taken seriously and acted upon.
Do all teachers like to have parents coming into the schools and sitting on councils?
No, I don't think all teachers do, but I think it's because in the past it's been done in inappropriate ways. I think that as long as parents are aware of their place within the school, and as long as it's organized and structured by the administration, then parents serve an extremely important part in the school, and they should be there. But again, just having parents in wandering around and without any true focus is a dangerous thing, and that nobody's really doing any good in that way. But as long as parents and teachers, again, are focused and are clear about what's expected of them and their tasks, I think it can be beneficial.
Mm-hmm. How would you go about in bringing them together, especially teachers who might be uncomfortable with having parents part of the decision-making process?
I would see that as part of the staff development training. I would, upon becoming a principal, I'd like to meet with the staff separately and explain my expectations and get their expectations and work together to develop school-wide expectations, and I would do the same with a group of parents. And I would explain that everything that's done would be communicated beforehand, and there would be no surprises, and that people would be very clear as to the expectations and as to their roles for the school-based management process.
All right, so you'd set up some really clear, definitive roles and a system for, and I think it's fair to say that there's probably no right, wrong answer to this, because I know there are various models and various school systems, but what I'm hearing you say is you're going to bring people together, and there's going to be a lot of training, and I personally think you're right in that regard. You're mentioning staff development, and staff development seems to be very important in so many areas. How else would you use staff development? Or where would you focus in your staff development?
Well, again, I think that would most beneficially come from the staff itself and what they felt the areas they would like to work on. In my school, we've had the freedom to choose what areas of staff development we'd like to work on for each year. There are certainly a lot of hot topics out there. I mean, process science, cooperative learning, math manipulatives, literature-based reading. There's many, many different areas. I've had experience with many of those within my own teaching, and could be a valuable resource to any school that would be interested in starting any of those areas. So I'd do that. I think it's very important that it comes from, again, the staff, and that training and resources are provided from the principal.
What I hear you saying is that you'd probably use the research then, and you try to keep up with the research as much as possible.
Right.
Which, and you mentioned whole language before, and I had whole language as one of the questions. What does whole language mean to you? I mean, define whole language for me, and tell me how you use it in your classroom. How would you expect your teachers to use whole language in their classrooms?
Again, I would expect that if they've been trained in it before, they're expected to use it, unless they would prefer to do some risk-taking and to try it if they've read books or have seen other people doing it, which I would encourage, again, as a principal, that teachers view other teachers teaching. I think it's important, and that they're valuable resources for staff development. As from my own personal view of whole language, and there are many different definitions of whole language, I feel that whole language is a process to learn reading, writing, and communication, and it's taking the children's own experiences and building from what they know already to develop the reading process through that, rather than taking external materials, books that they are not familiar with the characters or that have little interest to them, utilizing their own personal experiences and encouraging reading and writing and communication through their personal experiences, and using a wide variety of materials as well. So often we're stuck in a basal reading series where we just have a book and a workbook and maybe some worksheets that go with it. I see whole language utilizing many different kinds of literature, utilizing music and poems, activity, actually physically moving, using big books and trade books, and I'm utilizing whole language in the 5th grade, and I've done it in 1st and in 2nd, and the children really seem to get involved in it. Hands-on learning is so important, and when they're involved, there's much more learning happening, so I would encourage teachers to use that, and hope that they feel comfortable enough to
And is every
experiment.
teacher in your school using whole language now?
No, they're not.
Okay, so let's, if you were the principal and you really wanted the staff to embrace the whole language approach, how would you go about to make the change?
Well, again, I would hope that it would come from within them. As a principal, I would provide the resources available, the training available, the research that shows that it's the most beneficial way of learning. But if people are not going to be interested in it or not desirous to do it, then it's going to be more detrimental to force, I believe, to force them to do something that they're uncomfortable with. As a teacher, I would not want to be forced to do something, but I would certainly take gentle prodding seriously and consider, experimenting with different things. But as long as there's learning going on and I have evidence of learning, I would not try to pressure a teacher into doing something that he or she does not feel comfortable doing.
Okay, and I assume that then this would be part of the staff development
Yes.
again.
Mm-hmm.
Is it fair to say that whole language may not work for every child, as well as every method does not work for every child?
Absolutely, and it may not work for every teacher as well, yes.
And it may not work for every teacher. And a teacher who has been successful with the phonics method may continue to use that method,
Right, and
the whole language method, and any other methods in order to create the changes in children that they
Yes.
that work for children.
yes, absolutely.
Have you been following educational reform?
Yes, I have.
Why don't you tell us about it? Is there anything in educational reform that you think is going to be really important for education in Massachusetts?
There are many things, I think.
And what are they? What is it?
One of the most important that I feel personally is that the need for continual staff development, and I know that Massachusetts is far behind. I have friends that work in New Hampshire that are required to take courses every year, and they don't have to pay for it themselves. The state pays for it, and I think that's a wonderful program, and I think it encourages people to be lifelong learners, and that's what we're trying to get our students to be, as lifelong learners, and we need to model that ourselves. Many teachers, for various reasons, have difficulty continuing their education, and I think that it's real important that we stay up on the latest trends, and I think it's important that society realize that, recognize that, and support it, and support teachers and educators in their continual growth. And by support, not only emotionally, but with funding as well. That's one area.
So that part of the law that's going to require that cities and towns use part of the money
Right.
for training, you feel is very important.
Yes, I do.
Anything else in the law?
Yes, the move towards school-based management, I feel, is a very progressive move. Again, we're not living in the same society as a factory model school system, and we need to involve the communities within our school systems so that they will have an idea of what happens, and they'll be supportive of what happens within our schools. If they don't know what's going on, they're not going to be supportive. So I think that school-based management is a method of getting people involved within the schools and actually getting them in and making them part of the decision-making process. And once people have the responsibility and have the trust of decision-making, then they will feel more, I think they will have more dedication and support for the school systems. So I feel that's very important, although I see that it's, in the school reform, it seems to be getting less and less, more and more watered down at this point as it goes through the
And the House
Senate.
bill is
Yes.
somewhat watered down. I think it has been. If you were the principal and the council, the parents and the teachers, came up with a decision or decisions that you didn't necessarily agree with, in fact, you might even disagree. I mean, that probably would happen on many occasions. How would you handle that situation? Decision had to go to the superintendent. You have a council that's coming up with a decision. You're not comfortable with it, but you form the council.
Right.
You agree with the process. How would you handle that situation?
Well, I would hope that I would stay in close communication with the group and know which way they were leading before it actually came to my desk. So I wouldn't want to be surprised by anything at that point. I would have already known what's happening.
Good.
I would try. I'm a very strong-willed person, so I would probably try to sway them to believe in my point of view, and I would try doing whatever I could, providing research, and try to be as persuasive as possible. If they came up with adequate reasons, and if I felt like it was a group of people who just felt differently than I did, and it was going to be educationally beneficial and not detrimental to anybody, I'd have to send it along to you and just make sure that you knew my reservations as well.
That's a good answer. I think I have to state, I know there are no right and wrong answers for these, especially the school-based management models or the council models, because I think the whole country is just trying it out right now.
Yes.
The whole idea of change, you probably discussed change in your studies at Harvard. The whole idea of change and changing a faculty, changing a program, going through the process of change. What are some of the guidelines you use in making changes? Coming into here we have 3 schools, 3 different faculties, 3 different cultures, if you will, even in the same town. How would you approach change, and would it be the same for each school?
No, I think it would depend again on the culture of the school and the situations that are happening at each school. The way that I would approach change would be, that's a very broad question. Communication, I think, is the key, and I think it's very important that going into a new job as a principal that I communicate my expectations, and I am a good listener and listen to the expectations of the faculty, of the students, and of the parents. I think it's very important that we develop a community that will work together towards change, and it just can't be my ideas. I don't expect to come in and make all kinds of changes, but I would prefer to see things happen as cooperatively and make our initiatives be group efforts and reflect everybody's, our many people's wishes and opinions. So again, I feel communication would be the key to make sure that everything is communicated clearly, expectations are communicated clearly, and then if a decision is made to change a program or a method or a structure, and that I think that it's important that training and research follow and that people are not left hanging, that everybody feels comfortable and knows that there's going to be transition and that within the process of change there's going to be uncomfortable feelings, but hopefully it will be for the better.
Back to your peer supervision model, your supervision model. If at the end of some rigorous supervision and help to the teachers, you found that you weren't seeing the improvement that you wanted with the staff, how would you proceed after that?
Well, again, it would not be a surprise to me because I would keep abreast of all the information and situation as it goes. It's very important that supervision be a year-long process and not just something that happens in June. So I would be aware again of the state of the teacher, if it were a teacher at this time. I think that it's important again that the teacher have every opportunity to make changes and to make improvements and to show that learning is taking place. And I would certainly, again, work under the guidelines of the school system. But if there were a situation that was just unacceptable, I would have to make a recommendation to you for termination or for whatever the next steps are according to your contractual agreements.
So you'd move forward to some kind of action for
Yes.
improvement or discipline
Absolutely.
or dismissal.
Right. We're there to serve the children, and it's important that we do so in the best way possible.
Have you, in your reading of the Ed Reform Law, have you looked at some of the changes in the dismissal process?
Yes. And
What do
the
you think
tenure
of those
process.
changes?
I think it's scary as a person who's received tenure now. It's awfully comfortable to say, well, I know I have a job. But I think it's important that very few businesses have such systems as our school systems do with tenure. And I think that it's important that the people making the decisions as to whether people should stay or go are very well trained themselves in staff supervision and not just making arbitrary decisions about who's going to stay and go because of likes or dislikes. I think it's extremely important that there's expectations that are followed, and I think we need to strive for excellence, and I'm willing to do that as a principal.
In Wakefield, we've been looking very carefully and implementing the inclusion model, bringing special education teachers as much as possible in the classroom, and also as much as possible having the special education youngsters stay in the regular education classes.
Yes.
I think the research is really clear. The longer they stay in regular education classes, the more they learn.
That's right.
Are you familiar with the inclusion model?
Yes, I am. As a matter of fact, I've piloted a program with that teacher that I worked as a peer supervisor for. That was one of the things that she wanted to work on. So actually, I did not pilot it, but I observed it being piloted. It was wonderful. It really was. She had a few children that went out to Point 3, which is they did a majority of their day out of the classroom in a special ed setting, and she had she and the special ed teacher worked together, and they rearranged their schedules so that the special ed teacher could be in the classroom for the majority of the morning and work with the special ed students as well as the regular ed students. And I think that all students benefited from that program. It was wonderful to see all children working together and not separated, and there was no stigma. The children were not aware that the reason why that teacher was there was to work with certain children, because that teacher worked with groups of children, and I think it was great for the self-esteem of the children who were attending the special ed classes, because they really felt as included part of the classroom.
Thank you. I have a question from someone in the audience. How much emphasis, Lisa, or attention would you give to repeated complaints parents may have about a certain teacher's teaching style in your building? If the same complaints arise several years in a row, what would you do? For example, a veteran teacher who is well-dressed, polite, politically correct, friendly in the school with staff on the surface, then this person closes the door to the outside world
Oh my gosh.
of the school, and then constantly yells at children or picks on certain ones or plays favorites, in turn causing children to be upset at home. This results in parents requesting a different teacher for their children year after year. How long would you put up with this? Do you have a solution?
Yes, I do. No, again, my style of supervision would be that I would be within the school, and I would be observing every day, not formally, but I'd know what's happening in the school, the schools in which I would work. I would be walking through classrooms, and I would make teachers try to feel as comfortable as possible with that. But I mean, I'm not going to be with a clipboard taking notes, but I want to know what's happening, and I want to make sure that situations as this such as this do not happen. I'd have to speak with that teacher and make that maybe, discuss possible goal setting that would relate to what I've seen in the classroom. If I observed a teacher speaking in an inappropriate way to a child and without respect, I'd have to say something. It would be my job, and I would not let it go by. But I would have to observe it myself again, and I would do that because that would be part of my daily routines.
So one of the themes in most of your answers, but you would be on top. You would be on top of things. You'd be
Right.
communicating.
Right.
One of your references that I read, and they were good, was that you're a doer. What is it that you do that made this person say you were a doer? What does she mean by that?
I think it's what is it that I don't do? I'm a very active person. I've always been involved. I take my profession very seriously. I've always kept very up to date on the latest trends, and I've made them part of my teaching and administrative styles. I'm involved in many aspects, in many initiatives in the Melrose Public Schools, and I see that happening. I'm a very active person, and I have to be involved in things. So I think that's what she meant, is that I'm a doer. I get people motivated. I've brought many initiatives to our school and have made our school a pilot school for many new programs, such as the volunteer program. As we piloted a math series. We're now piloting a literature-based reading series. We started the Book Buddies program in our school before any other schools in Melrose had started that. They took that from us. I've served as a resource person for mathematics and literature-based reading and whole language. And I hate to toot my own horn like that, but
No,
I've been involved in many
you're a
things, and I
doer.
think that's what the person meant.
Another reference I made on you indicated that you know the difference between congeniality and collegiality.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us what the difference is?
I think the difference is that in collegiality, people respect each other and work together to better the education process as it exists at the school. In congeniality, people smile at each other and close their doors and go ahead and do whatever they want. But in collegiality, there's an atmosphere of sharing, of trust and communication, one of respect, professional respect and personal respect. There's a lot of congeniality in schools. I think people are pleasant to each other, and they close their door and don't share their methodologies or their ideas towards education. And I think it's a shame, because teachers are such valuable resources. They truly need the opportunities to share with each other, to learn from each other. to better the student's education.
Are you concerned that this job entails the supervision of 3 schools?
I'm concerned in that I think it will be a challenge. I would look forward to, though. I don't see that as being a problem. I think I can
And
handle it.
when I mentioned that schools have different cultures, is it possible that each school, each of the 3 schools, has a different culture?
Oh, I would expect
And
that they do.
would you approach them differently?
I would not initially approach them differently, but I would realize that, I mean, I have my own style of approach, and I think that I would stay with that style of approach, but I believe that after the initial contact, each school has to be treated differently because they all have their own cultures and their own problems and their own strengths, and I think that they have to be treated individually. As far as the way I treat them, I'll just try to be sensitive to those differences.
If you were the principal and I were to follow you around for a week, what would I be seeing? What kinds of activities would you be involved in?
Well, you better wear your roller skates because I'm going to be busy. I would be. The key to effective administration, I think, is to be proactive rather than reactive. So again, I would try to be seen as much as possible within the buildings, to make myself known to parents, to teachers, to students, to model the behaviors that I expect, the respect. I would model the kindness, the considerateness, everything that I expect from students and teachers. I would try to model myself, and I would be in and out of classrooms, observing children, talking to parents, talking to teachers, watching what goes on, complimenting people on their work and the children on their work, on any initiatives that have been taken. It's a very exciting job. I look forward to it.
You mentioned long-range planning in Melrose.
Yes.
Wakefield is in the end of a long-range planning program right now. And what part did you play in the long-range plan? I have read the plan, and I compliment you on the plan.
Thank you. I've been involved. It's a strategic plan that's set up through the school committee, involving community people, teachers, parents, and students at different levels. I was involved in a specific area, the volunteer program, which was to increase the base of volunteers utilized in the school system. I served on an advisory council to our volunteer coordinator and went to a training session for a few days at the Lord Wakefield, and have been involved in writing job descriptions for volunteers as needed by the teachers in our school, and will be part of, sort of be a liaison to the coordinator at this point.
Good, that's an important process, and I imagine you'll be continuing to look at that program every year.
Yes, reevaluation.
As we will, too. How do you feel about your responsibility to the other principals, elementary principals especially, but the entire administrative team?
Right. I think, again, collegiality should extend to the administrators. I would look to the other administrators for guidance and assistance when needed, and to share things. I would want to share my initiatives and expect that they share their initiatives. I'm sure that principals have dealt with many issues that I will, as a principal, encounter, and hope that I would get the support and advice from those people. I would expect the same relationship that I would expect among the staff in my school, and that would be one of respect and hopefully open communication.
Lisa, what are your professional goals, your long-term goals?
Well, I'd like to be the principal of the ward, the Walter, the Westford School. But I've thought a lot about that, and I've been since going to Harvard, I've been out of school for a few years. Professionally, I would like to work in administration for a while. Anyhow, I want to get my feet wet in administration, principal administration, and see how I enjoy that, and perhaps go back and work on my PhD and continue on from there. I'd like to take Spanish this summer. That's a short-term professional goal.
Good idea, good idea. Well, before we close with this part of the interview, we might want to consider opening it up to the audience, okay?
Right, are there any other questions that people have that you'd just like to ask?
Yeah, I would like to know if you are familiar with the philosophy and principles of total quality management as it relates to total quality education, the movement on total quality education. And
I'm not familiar with that term. I'm sorry. Could you repeat
Total
that?
quality management,
Total call.
Jennings, 14 points.
No, I'm sorry.
Are there any other questions?
To go back to Karen's question, how much, from that question that was asked earlier,
Yeah.
I don't think you answered the first part, how much would you pay attention to what parents are saying to you? And what credibility do you give parents for, supporting their children and questioning something that may be happening in the school?
Right. I would give parents a lot of credibility. I mean, I would treat you with respect I would expect that you treat me with, and I would have a person with a concern come in to my office and speak with me about it and express their concern, and I would certainly take action upon it. I wouldn't just brush it aside.
When you evaluate people, would you use the parental, parents can give good evaluations for people as well as negative.
That's
It's
right.
not a negative way only.
Right.
Would you take that into consideration too?
Well,
In the evaluation process, comments parents off for?
right. In the formal evaluation process, I don't think Wakefield is at this point where they're involving parents in the evaluation of teachers, are you?
Not in the formal process.
Not in the formal
no.
process. But I mean, that would certainly be reflected within the
Certainly in the
process.
informal one.
Yeah. But concerns and questions regarding somebody's professionalism would certainly spark my interest in the evaluation process, and I would have to make sure that I, take that seriously and then go in and observe, and not just observe during specific observation time set aside, but again, I'd be in the every day walking through classrooms and seeing things happening, so I would probably be seeing the same thing that you're saying. I would be very surprised if, being as visible as I hope to be, that I did not see something like that happening if it were occurring. Does that answer your question?
Are there any others?
How do you feel, given the fact that the reform bill may remove principals from collective bargaining and have you work on the individual contracts?
Right.
How do you feel about the type of feedback or input or the role of the parents or teachers could play in the evaluation of principals and the decision of whether to extend the principal's contract?
Right. I think it's a scary thing to move from the security of the collective bargaining agreements and the contracts on which we work under, but I think it's a good thing, and I think that it's a necessary thing, and I would feel comfortable in my my role as a principal and in my duties as a principal. I would feel comfortable with my own excuse me, I just went blank, with my own qualifications, and that I was doing the best job that I could, and hopefully that would be reflected in my work and people would see that. But again, it has to be taken seriously. You can't just look at personal vendettas. I mean, it has to be a majority, and it has to be based within fact.
If the superintendent asked you, looking at the evaluation model for principals, and he asked you, would you recommend that the parents in your three schools and the teachers in your three schools have some sort of role, whether formal and informal, in the evaluation of your service? How would you feel about that?
I would be willing. I would be willing to participate in that as long as it was acceptable, and as long as the other principals didn't feel threatened by such a thing. I would be willing to serve as the pilot for that. Anything else?
Well, let me ask the obligatory last few questions in an interview, okay? What are your strengths and what do you consider your weaknesses to be?
I think as far as strengths go is that I do like to encourage people to take initiative. I've been involved in many initiatives myself within our school, and I'm familiar with many different programs and philosophies and methodologies that I think I can share with the Wakefield Public Schools. As far as weaknesses go, I would say life experience at this point may be a weakness for me. I also am a workaholic. I really get involved in my job and tend to take a lot of work home with me and have a hard time separating myself from work. So I think personally I find that a weakness in my professional state.
Well, could be a strength too, I guess.
I hope.
Do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make?
No, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you in this kind of forum. I think this has been new for me, and I've been through a few different interviews, and I've never seen this format. I think it's great that you involve the public again, and I look forward to seeing you again and wish you all the best in luck. I hope that you find a candidate that you're comfortable with and someone who will progress your school system even more.
Thank you, and we'd like to thank you. This is a new format for us as well, and you were first, and I probably was a little intimidating, but I think you did really well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
Thanks.
Invite everybody to